No. So, so today we will starting with an conversion operators. On the last turn we discussed about that's a subscript operator, how to overload subscript operator, and we were returning using references. So today we are going to discuss another topic, that is a conversion operator. Now, what's the meaning of this one? Just wait for a few seconds. Let's take. We talked about first data conversion and then how to overload conversion operators. Now, what is a data conversion? So if we go by this one, so the assignment operator will assign a value from one variable to another. Look at this one. Integer variable 2 is assigned to integer variable 1. Now, this assignment operators, what does the compiler do? It will check out what is the type on the left hand side, what is the type on the right hand side. If they are same, then there is no problem. Immediate assignment is done. If they are not same, then compiler will try to convert it. Now, this is a statement. Here I have an integer variable 1 and integer variable 2. Both of them are same type, so the conversion is immediate. Now, second, that look at this one. You may have also noticed that this is for primitive data type. So you may have also noticed that assignment assigns the value of one user defined object to another, provided they are of the same type. In the statement like this, so if you look at this one, I have a statement dis3 assignment operator followed by dis1 plus dis2. So here, how this is evaluated? So first assignment is evaluated, this one is added to dis2, and the value is now assigned. So here if you look at that, type on the left hand side and type on the right hand side. So on the right hand side, the type is of distance, the object, both the operands of type direct distance. Similarly, distance 3 is also of type distance. So here on the left and right, on both side of the operator, we have a same type of a object. So either we have a same type of a variable or same type of object, then there is no need for a data conversion. So we don't know distance are look at this one, distance 1, distance 2 and distance 3 are object of user defined data type distance. So here we are having a same thing. Now look at these statements. So assignment between types, whether they are basic type or a user defined type, are handled by the compiler. So the assignment is basically handled by the compiler with no effort on our part. So assignment between types, whether they are basic type or user defined, means are handled by compiler with no effort on part. What's the meaning of this one? This will be obvious in a just a few minutes. So provided that the data type is used on both sides of the equal type. So here we do not have to do anything. Compiler will take care of it. Means if you have a same type on the left hand side and the right hand side. Now, but what happens when the variables on the different side of assignment operator are of different type? Now the question arises here, if they are of different type. So here, when we say an assignment operator, I'm saying for an assignment operator, you must have some definition. Means in case of a object of a class, we have a definition added by compiler. What it will do? It will do a member-wise copy of each and every data member of a object. So here a routine is required. We are not going to add it because compiler do it on its own. If you want to define assignment operator, you can always overload assignment operator in your program, but by default, if you are not writing it, compiler is going to add it. So here compiler is going to add it, but it is going to add it for a same type but not for a different type. So what you have to do for a user defined data type, I have to write my own conversion operator. And for a primitive data type, these conversion routines are with the compiler. So compiler use one of these routine to convert a that's a implicit or that's a primitive data type from one type to another type. Now conversion between basic types. So here let's take a case. When we write a statement like this, integer variable assigning a value with a float variable. So here you have a integer data type, here you have a float data type. Now this is to be assigned to integer variable. Now here the value is of type float, here the value is of type integer. Now how it is done? So here what the compiler will do, convert float variable to of in type before assignment. So it will be assigning to a integer value, and how it is to be converted. A routine is with a compiler or a piece of a code is with a compiler. Compiler will automatically invoke that piece of code, convert a float variable to a integer variable and assign to a integer variable. Now where integer variable and float variable are of different types, so here we are assuming that the compiler will call a special routine, fine, to convert a value of float variable, which is expressed in floating point format to an integer format so that it can be assigned to integer variable. Now question is that where is this special routine? These special routines are with compiler. So when we say what is a compiler, compiler has a parsing capability and then it has the possibility of invoking the base. So as soon as the compiler see this statement, it will come to know that I need a routine to convert a floating point variable to an integer variable. If it is available with a compiler, it's okay. If it is not available with compiler, then this will give you an error. Then this will be an error message if not available with a compiler. It means, but for a primitive data type, all of these are routine are provided by the distributors. So these are available with a compiler. So compiler have these things. So here when we're talking about between basic types, so basic types are basically handled by compiler. How it is done? It is done by a special routine that are part of a package of a compiler. So we say such conversion are implicit. Why we implicit? I do not invoke any conversion operator here. So it is implicit, but we can also do it explicit. If we write a conversion operator here, then it will become explicit. So here if you write this statement, float value is converted to integer value, then this conversion is implicit. Now next thing is that sometime instead of implicit, I want it to be an explicit conversion. So here sometime we want to force compiler to convert one type to another. So here what we do to do this, we use a cast operator. So here the same statement, the previous statement, here what I am using, I am casting float variable to a integer variable. So I use a static cast. So I think we have already discussed about the static cast in the beginning of the course. So we are talking about it's a converting, and this is a better option in comparison to the previous one, because in case of a previous C programming, what we do, I use a integer, then we followed by a float variable. So I use this statement to convert it. So this was something is a problem with a readability. So here I use a something obscure type of reading. So as soon as I read this statement, I come to know basically float variable is to be converted to a integer variable. So this type of casting is there. So in case of a C++, I'm not using this type of casting. Instead, I will be using a static cast, and within the within that left and right chevron, I am using a integer. So converting into an integer, and it's an integer variable. So here, basically, when we're saying a integer here, it's a conversion operator. So this is a conversion operator, and casting provide explicit conversion. Why explicit? Because I am writing a statement here. So it's a explicit. In the previous case, I am not writing anything. So it's a implicit. Compiler handle on its own. Here, compiler is directed to convert float variable to an integer variable. So here the conversion is explicit. So I have to write. So either I'm going to write it or I'm not going to write it. For this particular example, it is going to be converted to float variable to an integer variable. So, however, such explicit conversion use the same built-in routines. So here, when we say I'm calling it, I am calling the same conversion operator here and the same conversion operator here. And these are the built-in routines with a compiler. So I am just using it them as implicit conversion. So means those routines that are used for implicit conversion are also used for explicit conversion. Somewhere I may write it to make it more readable. Otherwise, I will skip it. Still, the compiler is going to add those routine to your code, and it will be converting up. So if we say conversion, I am converting to a particular type. So I need a conversion operator. So explicit conversion need a conversion operator. So I'm going to track what?
Sir,
Yeah.
so do these built-in routines comes with all versions of the compiler, or there is something different from that? I mean, there are some customized versions, or I mean, I just want
Actually,
to ask what do these built-in routines actually mean?
what we say, we have a C programming language, and we have a grammar of a C programming language. So all the compiler must be using this grammar to get the convert your code from a C program to a machine code. But there are few things that are added by a distributor on their own, so that their compiler may become more efficient. So something that is written in a language, it's there in all the compiler. But if something is not written, then the distributor optimize those part to give you a better result. So here, when I'm going to say that it's a float variable to integer variable, it's something that is a part of a language. So this must be there with all the compilers, all the C and C++ compiler. Fine. So here, because you know the routines are there, and it is something that is used in common way. So all the compiler of the means will be using it, because it's defined in a language you can able to cast it. And if you are not able to cast it, then it will be a problem. So the compiler will create a problem for you. So all primitive data types are basically built-in types. So if we say these are provided by a library, so even when say stdio, stdio is not a something that is provided by a C language. It's a library. It's provided by third party. So here again, I think these are something that are added so that the language become more useful and the compiler become much more efficient. So they are provided. So most of them, I haven't seen that none of them has to be provided, but I think most of them is providing these routines. So it's a part of a compiler itself.
Okay, so
Fine.
sir,
Suppose
that
I
is
just
basically
write a one statement in front of you. Let's take I write a is equals to, just give you an example where it can create a problem. Let's take I have function one. Let's take I write this statement. Now the question is that how this statement will be executed. So this statement execution may be different from one compiler to another compiler. Now question is why? Here I have a first operator. This is my second operator. It will be evaluated first. In general, if it is a integer variable a plus b, so a plus b is evaluated. But here I have a function 1 and function 2. So here it's a possible that compiler may execute function 1 before, or some compiler may execute function 2 before. So function 2 and function 1 may be related, having some common data, so they may modify a value there. So here the result may be different from one compiler to another, because language does not define how to, in which order, or how to or in which order the functions are to be executed for particular operand. So here the compiler will try to optimize, and due to optimization it may using some technique or the other technique, so it may either execute function 1 and then later on function 2, or some compiler for its own optimization technique may be executing function 2 first and then function 1 later. So these are the problems that may arise because these are not part of a language how to evaluate two functions for a given operand. So this is something that may leads to a different result. Now you get an idea. But if I write a plus b, where a and b are of integer type, then there is no problem. But if you write in the form of function, it will create a problem. And this problem is also known as functional side effects. So functional side effect may exist from one compiler to another. Now you may ask what you want.
Okay, sir, then it basically means that it sometimes we may not need to do typecasting from our own side. Sometimes it can be done by the compiler on its own, but
So
it is advised that we do it so that if the built-in type is not provided by the provider, then then we will not get the error. Is that the
law,
thing?
not exactly. So if I say I am using static cast, I am using built-in routine. If it is not provided, you can't use it, because otherwise you have to write for your own data type. So here I am saying I am talking about integer data type, float data type, and these are primitive data type. And for primitive data type, there are built-in routines there. So if you write it, you are just using this routine. So means what you are doing, you are basically calling, that's a conversion operator here, and routine of conversion operator is provided by a part of a compiler. So if you are explicitly writing it or implicitly using it, basically you are using same built-in routines that are provided by a compiler. So when we say implicit or explicit, it doesn't matter. It requires a same built-in routine. So that's the first point is you're correct. But second point is that if you are using it, you are using inbuilt routines for a primitive data type. For a user-defined data type,
Okay.
compiler is not providing it. Why it is not providing it? Because compiler is unaware of your data type, because you are writing this data type after the creation of a compiler. Fine. So here that's up here
Okay, sir.
for a integer, or we say for primitive data type, integer, character, float, double. These routines are provided for a distance class, for a time class, for a student class. Means those classes that are defined by you, you have to write your routine on your own, because compiler is only providing routines for built-in type. So today we are going to discuss this thing only. So conversion between objects and basic types. So I'm going to see the first case. So again, taking a same example, that is distance. So distance is a routine that is written by you, or a class that is provided by you. So it's a private. Now in this case, we are writing something const float mtf is a multiplication factor, that is meter to feet, means how to multiply feet to get a meter there. So then you have a integer feet, then you have a float inches. Within this, you add a one more constructor. This constructor is a zero argument constructor, initializing feet to 0, inches to 0.0, and constant to 3.2808333, a floating point value. Now look at this one. This is const, and I have to initialize const using initializer list. Fine. Otherwise, it's not possible. So means at the time of creation, I have to initialize it. Otherwise, this is a constant value. You cannot change it. So for this, only possibility is to use initializer list for initializing a constant. So one of the application of a initializer list here. So it's a no argument constructor. Then you have a distance float MTF. So here, what you are doing, you are creating another constructor, a one argument constructor, and again using a initializer list to initialize MTF in your class. Then you have converting it to a meters into a feet, then feet into a integer variable. Then you have a inches, which means feet minus integer feet. You will get a fraction multiplied by 12, you get an inches. So you are converting length in meter into float and inches using your second constructor, or constructor with a one argument. Next you have a constructor with a two argument, and you are basically again using initializing list to check to initialize value of feet, inches, and meters to feet constant, initializing this value. So we are using three constructor in our program. So it's a constructor with a two arguments, again a constructor with a two arguments. So we have a new argument constructors. Sorry, it's a one argument constructor. Now I'm writing a operator float constant. So what's there? This is a operator overloading. Here I am overloading conversion operator and putting it const. So this value is not changing the parameters that we are going to pass. So the object that is going to invoke this routine will not be modified by our maze conversion operator here. Now look at the syntax here: operator float, no return type. So I don't have a return type here. So it's a conversion operator node, no return type. So I'm not putting a return type here. Then within the body, I write a float fraction feet is equals to inches divided by 12. So if you divide inches by 12, it will give you a feet there. Then fraction feet is equals to fraction feet static cast float to feet. So here I am converting feet to a float value and then assigning it to a fractional feet there, and then I am returning fractional feet divided by MTF. Fine. So here you are providing inches and float. So here it's means object of type distance is converted into a value, that is value is of floating data type. Fine. So here operator float, conversion operator float. Purpose of this float is to convert distance into a floating point value. So next is remaining functions are there. So you have a get distance, how to read a distance from a user. Then you have a function that is show distance to display a distance from to a user. Now remember this, it's something like a constructor. In a constructor, we use a name of a class, no return type. Here, I am using no return type, but I'm saying it's a conversion operator, so I need an operator converting the value of an object to a float. If you want to convert into an integer instead of float, you may use integer. If you want to convert into a character instead of float, you may use a float. So the thing that you want to convert, that is a prefix of an operator, and cost is something optional. If you write it, it's better because I'm not modifying inches and float in my code. So that is why I'm putting a const here. Now let's take within this code, you use static cast and you convert feed integer into a float. So I am using explicitly here. So if you don't use explicit, again the compiler will convert it. So here compiler know how to convert feed to a integer value to a floating point value. It also knows how to convert a floating point value to an integer value. So right now I am using inbuilt routine within my float, but on a primitive data type. So feet is of type integer, inches is of type float, and routines are available with a compiler for these values. Routine is not available for distance, but for feet and inches, it's available because it's an integer or a floating point value, and these things are available. So I am using it here indirectly and converting my distance to a floating point value. Now let's try to see a main program. Now, in case of a main, I write integer main here. Then you have a float meters. So a floating point value, that is meters. Then you have a distance 1, 2.35 Fahrenheit. Now, question is that 2.35 floating point value. Now, question is that which constructor is invoked? Here, distance is an object, so it must be created. So it must be created by which constructor?
Default constructor.
Not a default here, because I am providing a value 3.25. So basically this is a one argument constructor. Distance followed by a meters. So it's a second. Look at this one. It's a distance followed by meter. So this is a one argument constructor that is invoked to convert a floating point value to a distance. So into feet and inches. So this is a one argument constructor that is invoked at this point. So you have a one argument constructor used to initialize distance, and 2.35 meters will be converted into feet and inches. So value of feet and inches will be initialized for a distance feet and inches. So this will be displayed here. So when you see out this show distance, so if you what are the values, it will be shown by this particular statement of a program. Then you have a meters, then you have a static cast, then you have a float and distance. So this is using my this particular routine. I have a float, means I am converting distance to a float, and this is code for converting distance into a float. So what we'll be doing, we will be invoking operator float for here. So here argument is or object is distance 1, and this operator is invoked for distance 1, and it will convert distance into a floating point value, that is meters. So this will be basically converting back here. So it uses a conversion operator that we have defined in the previous slide, and values are going to be assigned. I am using a static cast. So here my explicit call is there, but if I am not using this call, I simply do not write it, then still compiler know, because you have added it. So you have added this routine, compiler know how to convert distance to a meter. So compiler will be invoking your operator there, operator float, for converting distance into meter, and it will be converted. So either you can use explicit. It's better to use explicit, because you come to know I am converting distance to a floating point. It's not an error. If you are not using, routine is there, compiler will implicitly call that routine to convert distance into meter. So
Sir, but we have to use float before distance one, na,
look
to
at it.
call overloaded operator.
Okay, fine. what we're doing, I am using a static cast float. Now, if you are not writing this statement, this is of floating point data type. Look at this one, and this is of distance. So compilers knows that distance has to be converted to float. So it will be using a conversion operator float for distance one. So this much intelligence compiler have to convert what data type, because I am looking the data type on the left hand side. This is float and this is of type distance. So distance has to be converted to float, and we have already defined a routine here. That is a float operator. So I am converting distance to a float. So here compiler will be invoking this operator for converting distance in a float. Here I do not have an integer routine, so compiler cannot invoke an integer routine. If we have a integer routine and a float routine, the compiler will decide based on the content on the left hand side. So content on the left hand side ensures that I am going to convert distance into a float. So again, just try to this statement. This is a statement. Yes, I just. So look at this statement. This is my explicit call, and I am saying convert distance into float. So this is something that user have written it. But if you are not writing it, then what's the statement? Then what's the statement here? It's a distance one initialized to meter. What type of meter? Meter is of type float. So here distance cannot be written directly to meter. So copy of assignment cannot be done. So what does the compiler have to convert it? So compiler check your class, that is distance. Have you defined a routine for a float or not? If it is you have defined it, it will convert it. If you haven't defined it, then compiler will flag an error if this is not possible. So this will be an error here if you have not defined it. But if you have defined it, then again in implicit call, compiler call it, and there will be no problem. So there will be no error because we have already defined it in our class. So you know, got it? So either I invoke it using explicit call static cast float, convert distance to a float, or do not write it. And routine is there, so compiler will always going to invoke it.
Sir, if we write the name of the routine that is float, it would cause harm in or not? It
So
would be same.
I'm writing routine here. Here is a float routine is there. Look at this one. In a static call, I am using a word float here. Or even you can write it in a form of this one. If you write it in a form of like this float, distance 1, still is correct. If you write in a form of float within a parenthesis, and then you write a distance 1, still it's correct. So either you use in a term, because I am invoking a float routine, and explicit static cast is just to show that I am converting it. Fine. Actually, in this particular static cast, I am invoking a float routine that we have defined it. So either I write in this particular 1, 2, or 3. I can use any one of them, and it's correct.
No, I understood.
Fine. So either you write it. This is a C++ style, and these are C programming style. So this is a difference in a programming style. In a C++, I explicitly call using a static cast. In case of a C programming language, I used a casting operator float followed by a braces, parenthesis, and an operator there. Oh, sorry, object there. Or I can put it in a braces float and followed by an object. So these all the three statements are correct, and they are exactly the same meaning.
Sir, just now we had defined the overloaded operator for float, and you're saying that it is like of C type. So when we are using that as a C++ style of overloading, in as for example in second, as you've
No,
told.
no, no, no. The first one is a C++ style. Second and third are the C programming style. Static cast is basically a C++ style. Float followed by a parenthesis and distance is a C programming style. Float within a parenthesis followed by a distance is also a C programming style.
Okay, sir.
Right. So if you're talking style, this is a C++. Only this is a added by a C++. So this is a C++ style, and the remaining two options that we have discussed there right now is coming from a C programming language. So you got it. So I am converting it, and now I have used this statement because I have written a routine. Now compile, if I'm not writing this statement, compiler can do a implicit call because it's written by us in a distance class. So compiler know the routine is there and it will convert it. Otherwise, if routine is not there, then the compiler will give it as an error. It will flag an error and means it can't convert distance to a meter. So uses a conversion operator that we have defined in our class. So look at this one, cout distance 1 meters, and it's printing a value there. So I just, what is the distance 1 in meters? So it will be printed here. Now look at this second one. You have a distance to 510.25. Again, what we are doing? I am invoking two argument constructor, initializing value of a feet by 5 and inches by 10.25. So you create a second object, that is object distance 2. So look at this one. Here I have a meters distance 2. So it again uses a same conversion operator. Look at this one. Explicit call, implicit call. So the first one I have written as static cast. It's something explicit call. I have not written it, but still this is a valid statement because compiler have this routine float, and it will invoke float routine and convert distance 2 into meters. So again, this statement is going to work. So cout distance 2 meters, and it will be printing a value. What is the meters? What is the distance in a meters there? Then you have another statement, distance 2 meters. Now here I am converting distance to meter. Now question here is that meters to distance, can I convert it?
No, sir, because we are trying to convert float to an object.
Yes, very good. We are trying to convert float to an object. So here, if you say I am trying to convert float to an object, look at the statement here. 2.35 is a floating point value, and I am converting this floating point value to distance 1. So is there any difference between these two statements?
No, sir, they are.
Exactly. If we look at this statement, there is no difference from this part of a code. So it appears here the compiler will invoke a constructor, one argument constructor that will convert a floating point value to a distance object and initialize to distance 1. Similarly, the compiler will convert meters into a distance object using a one argument constructor and initialize to distance 2. But there is a catch. Look at the definition there. So if you go back to definition here, look at the distance here. Distance, it consists of three different fields: const, float, mtf, integer feet, and float inches. So here, in the statement here, so here in this statement, compiler will convert meter into a objects using one argument constructor that we have provided it. Fine. So this is converted into object. So this is my new object, that is object. Let's take temp. It consists of constant MTF, feet, and inches. Distance to is then also an object, and it also consists of constant and integer feet and floating point inches there. But here assignment is not possible. Conversion is possible, assignment is not possible. Why? Because you cannot copy a const from one object to another. If a field is constant, the first field of a class, look at this one, the first field of is a constant here, constant MTF. So you cannot modify this value. Though you are copying a same value, but you cannot say I am writing MTF is a constant. So if MTF is a constant, you cannot initialize it. But here I am using a routine that is I am using a routine. So I am using a routine distance and converting into an object. So this is also now an object using a one argument constructor, but assignment is not possible. Assignment of one object to another is not possible because of constant. So this constant in a distance to cannot be initialized with a that's a constant of meters object, and that is why it will not work. So here error won't convert, means assignment won't convert, means meter is converted to distance by a constructor, but assignment is a problem. So statement is not possible because of assignment operator, and that is why I have to comment out this statement for the proper execution of a program. And after this I simply return it, it's going to work. So got the problem here. Problem is that because of constant in my class object, and constant can be initialized only once, so assignment of one object to another is not possible. Fine, and it's true for all objects. So if I say I want to initialize distance 2 with a distance 1, is still the same error, but meters is going to be converted into distance by a one argument constructor. So constructor is basically converting primitive data type to a user defined data type. Operator conversion, that is operator float, is basically converting a user defined data type distance to a floating point value. So the conversion, for conversion I need two different types of things, a constructor and a operator. Constructor to create an object using a primitive data type, and operator, conversion operator, for converting a user defined data type to a primitive data type. You got the point? So what you do, try to compile this code and try to run it and check it out. When you write this statement, it will give you an error. If it is giving you error, try to eliminate a constant from the class, make it a constant within a that is distance function, and again compile. You will find that then this statement is going to work. If you remove a constant from a that's a field of a the distance class, then it's going to work. So if I do not write it here, remove from here and replace it with MTF by a simply by a value, remove these statement from the classes, these two statements from the classes, MTF substitute value by a 3.28, and it's going to work, and I will be able to compile this statement. So this try to do it and check it out that because of assignment it's not working, otherwise conversion is there, it's converted, but assignment, because of assignment it is not able to assign object created using meters to a distance object too. Now, so what we have seen, for a basic to user defined data type. So I need a constructor. From meters, I'm converting into a distance. So I need a constructor here. From a user defined to basic, I need a conversion operator, that is a float. So here, me what you want to do, if I want to convert from basic to user defined, I will be using a constructor in my class. If I want to convert my object to a basic data type, then I will be using a conversion operator. So I want to make it to a float, I will be using a float. If I want to make it to be a integer type, then I will be using operator integer. If I want to make to be a character type, I will be using a character star, so on. So this way we will be able to convert it to different types there. So got an idea? What is the purpose? This is a constructor. Constructor for converting basic to user defined, and operator for a user defined to basic. Fine. So we are going to take one more example. तो distance to convert नहीं हुआ था because it was converted by a that's a constructor, but assignment won't work. Similarly, this is going to work because here I don't need any assignment of a cost value. So, but we are going to take one more example, that is conversion between C string and string objects. So let's take an example here. I have a hash include IO string using namespace std and hash include string.h. So you have a class string. Look at the capital S. We say class string is now a user defined string, not a string that is provided by a C library. So it's a user defined string. So private, you have an enumeration, sz is equals to 100. Then you have a character string of size 80. Then you have a public, you have a string 0 is equals to null value, means you are writing a constructor here, that is a 0 argument constructor. Then you have a 1 argument constructor passing a name and copying a name from a string to a string class. Then you are displaying a string, and then you have an operator converting a string object to a C string variable. So here I am just converting this value. So I need a operator. So this is your conversion operator. This is your constructor. So this constructor converts C string to an object. This operator converts that's a string object to C string. So means I need two different things, a constructor here and a function here. This is for primitive to user defined, and vice versa. Here you have a user defined to primitive data. Fine. So I am both way converting from a object to a C string, again from a C string to an object. So here C string to an object to C string. When we say a C string, a string of C programming language, a string object that is defined by my class. It's not actually the library class, it's a user defined class that I am writing right now. Just to make it differentiate, it's a capital S here. When you using a string of an inbuilt library, it's a small s. Fine. So let's take example. You have a string s1. S1 object is created using 0 argument constructor. So you have a no argument constructor here. So you have a character str. means you are creating a C string. So this is your C type string that we define in C programming language. So that is why I'm calling a C style string. Then you writing S1 and XTR. So this is your C string. This is your S1 object of type string. So I need a conversion. Conversion means C string converted to object. What is required? So can anybody answer this with which routine will be used? So this is your implicit call. I am not writing it explicitly, but this is my implicit call. And now which routine will be used? Yes, anybody? Are you there? Yes, anybody can answer this question? So I think time is over. So I am just leaving it right now, and we will continue with this slide on the next turn.
Hello, excuse me,
Yeah,
sir. Sir, I
yeah,
have a doubt in overloading.
yeah.
Sir, just consider an example that we have defined distance and everything else, and we
Hmm.
are going to print
Hmm.
its feet and other details. Then
Uh-huh.
we have to do d1 dot feet, count d1 dot feet, something like that. But we want to define, we want to overload count and directly count distance, count d1. Then we get the output, its feet and other parameters. So my question is, then how can we overload this count and sin?
So means you want to see out and see in.
Yes, sir.
Don't call it a count. It's called it's a see out or see
Ah,
in.
okay, sir. Okay.
So in that case, what you do, if you want to print it, in case of you have to print an object, what we are doing right now, we will be printing our feet and inches. And what you want to say see out distance one, and it's
Yes, sir.
printed. Fine.
Yes,
So in this case, you need to overload see out operator.
yes, sir.
For this, you will be overloading, and I will let you know how to overload it. So you will be overloading insertion operator. Cout is an object. Operator is insertion. You have a two left shift. Fine. So
Yes,
in that case, the operator is operator insertion operator to left shift operator there, and then you means you want to return a object of a out stream, that is O stream. So return type is that is reference to O stream operator, left shift operator there, and then you have a object. So in that case, you will be writing a routine, and this is a declaration of an object, or the declaration of an operator, and then a code following this, and it will be a your routine for basically uh, overloading cout operator. Sorry, that cout operator, when we say, that is the left shift operator. Fine. So
yes,
that I will discuss it. Means here I need a operator overloading to take input from a user directly into scene and directly output using a distance object. So in that case, I need to overload cout and cin operators, and we will take example of this so that you can overload operator based on your class. I will discuss that example.
sir. One more doubt, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, when I served this, I searched
Uh-huh.
this on the internet and I found something that we have to connect IO stream with this
Yes.
and
Yes.
O stream.
Actually. you are absolutely correct, because when you use C out, you have to include IO stream. Remember?
Yes, sir.
So IO stream is basically a combination of a O stream class and I stream class. O stream is output stream,
Yes,
I
sir.
stream is input stream.
Yes, sir.
So when we say C out is an object of a O stream with assignment, and C in is an object of I stream with assignment. So means they are the object of a different classes, and these classes are basically clubbed together to form a IO stream class.
Yes, sir.
Fine. So when you have to overload, remember, then what you have to do, I have to look at the object. Object belongs to which type? So that is why I need to, miss, you have written it correctly, then I have to write it in this form. So this is a std stream, some Z is written it like this. So because I have to write it, because it's a conversion operator is basically a O stream operator. So you have to define that you are basically overloading a O stream operator there. So these are basically provided by a library. These classes are in a library. I have to just overload them and use in our class. So I think Zad has written the statement in a chat box, and we will be discussing this in our next class, how to overload OStream operator.
Yes, sir. Sir, what Zaid had written is correct. Like, but sir, my doubt is that while I was doing this, it showed an error. Like in our so sir, we have to do something like friend. I have to add friend method in front of it.
Yes, yes.
So sir, what is this friend method and why we are doing so?
Actually, means we are skipping few things. Because right now I cannot discuss a friend, because friend is something a special function that can access a private members of a class. Suppose I make a function a friend of a class, then that function can access a private member of that particular class. So this is something a violation of a data hiding, but it is required when you have to deal with objects of two different types. So C out is a different object, distance is a different object. Then I need
Yes.
to give a bridge between C out and a distance, so that data can be shared between C out and a distance object. Look at
Yes,
this
sir.
one in a Zile statement, means you are talking about the that's a O stream object. But what you have to do, you have to display a distance. So in this function, you may have to access feet and inches. If you want to access feet and inches, they are private in distance class. If they are private in distance class, this is not possible. So you make this function as a friend of that class. Now it can access private member of distance function. So I am going to
Okay.
discuss friend function, friend classes, and that's a overloading of stream operators. But I will start after the discuss this thing after the inheritance, because these concepts are basically coming from
Sir,
inheritance.
sir means friend is something like that is giving access to methods like private and
Yes,
other things.
friend is basically an alternate way to get access to a private members of a class. Otherwise, there is no other way to access a private member. You cannot access using a main function from a main function. You cannot access the operator that's an object of some other class. But that class is a friend to that second function. Then it may able to access a private member of a all the private member of a class if it is a friend of that particular class. So means if it is a friend, it can access private member of a class. So that is why I'm talking about friend is a bridge between two different types of objects.
Okay, sir.
So we will discuss about the friends. So I think I will be starting on the next step, inheritance. After inheritance, I will talk about a friend class, and later on I will discuss about the overloading of O stream and C stream, or O stream and I stream operators. Fine.
And sir, please also discuss the assignment overloading, sir. Assignment operator
We will
overloading.
discuss. Sure, we will discuss it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.